inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Judy here of Dr. Judy WTF, and thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to have a roller coaster of a show today. I have with me in studio Dr. IRENE YAYMADJIAN, one
Hello.
of my Hi, Dr. IRENE. Thank you for being here today.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
And we're going to have it kind of a little bit of a controversial, let's get our opinions out there and sort of take two sides on the matter of bipolar issues. And we're going to contrast it with borderline personality disorder. And we're going to definitely talk about nature versus nurture because as I quote Dr. Mehmet Oz in my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect, he says that nature loads the gun, and then nurture pulls the trigger. So let me give another example other than the field of psychology. Let's say that you're pre-diabetic and you never eat carbs, you never eat sugar, and so you just stay in a pre-diabetic state, even though nature has it loaded so that you're genetically predisposed that way. You don't have to ever trigger it. And it's the same thing, I think, with the brain chemistry. And obviously, bipolar is a controversial issue because from where I'm coming from, for those of you who have seen previous shows and the mind map, I always look to nurture because nature is a little bit more set in stone. And we do have to bring up the nature part because obviously we are built differently. Our biochemistry is different. However, I still think that when we mess with our emotions, when we've been injured at the causal level, it is going to create a really, really imbalanced biochemistry because this is our major psychopharmacological center. And when we're hurt, everything goes into motion there. So we're going to discuss this. And this is a call-in show, so please do call in 323-843-2826. And a little bit about the mind map for those of you who don't know. The mind map, this is something that I created to heal human disconnect, global disconnect, and then used it as a psychological model. I teach it to my staff. Dr. IRENE is well versed in mind map therapy.
It's my favorite thing to do.
Your favorite thing to do, right?
I do it on myself.
Of course, of course.
My whole family.
Of course. You stay up all night long looking at the cause, the reaction to the wound, and if you have the mind map up, thank you very much. So what the mind map is really a very, very focused way of looking at who done it, what happened, why you're feeling the way you're feeling, why you're experiencing the symptoms that you're experiencing, and how to reboot the system and morph out of this system gone wrong, as I like to put it. And so when you look at panel number 1, which is the top first one, you can see wounds, and those represent the 5 wounds of childhood, which are, I'm testing
Emotional.
you. I'm testing you.
Emotional. Let's see. No, wait. Oh my God, I just blanked out. Okay, so there's emotional wounds. There's physical wounds for physical abuse, emotional abuse, and smothering, which we love to talk about.
Which we did on the other show.
We did with the
Armenian families.
Yeah, the Armenian wounds.
Yes.
Cultural wounds.
Yes.
So smothering, emotional wounds, emotional pain. Physical pain. Oh my God. Sexual
and neglect.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So these
How can I forget that?
Yeah, because neglect, we sort of are
neglect,
forgotten, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
No pun intended.
so those, it's like that, and these wounds are not the neglect thing, and the smothering is overlooked because what we tend to focus on are wounds of commission, not omission. We have a phone call. Let me just finish this point. We'll get right to it. So when we commit something, like we violate somebody verbally, physically, sexually, that's a commission. When we omit something, that's neglect. We don't give the love and the nurturance. So yes, who is on the phone? You're on the couch with Dr. Judy and Dr. Irene.
Hello.
Hi there, my name is Ted Shapiro. I'm from Colorado. I'm calling in to ask a philosophical question.
Sure, nice to hear your voice.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question. So how long have you both studied psychology for? Just a curious question.
How long? I'm sorry?
How long have you studied psychology for?
Well, I've been a psychologist since 1996, and then prior to that, I was an MFT from 1993, and then prior to that, I had a stop smoking and weight loss clinic and graduate from UCLA undergrad, and just did a lot of work with starting with smokers and overeaters, and then going back to school to get the master's and the PhD and all the clinical hours. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wondering about Doctor. Well, I mean, I have my master's in clinical psychology, marriage and family therapy, and I have my doctorate in clinical psychology and marriage and family therapy, and I'm a licensed MFT. So, yeah, I've been. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. So you studied marriage?
Yeah, it's actually relationships. We look at how, like on this show, we're looking at bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So we would relate that as to how it affects a person's relationships
with themselves and with other people. So go ahead and ask away with your philosophical question.
All right. So my question is that I know I'm sorry if we'll get off topic here, but so marriage, I wanted to bring that up. So at the data, if we compare the divorce rate as an example, the divorce rate is fairly high. If anything, it's almost at a record high.
Yeah.
And almost around 50%. I personally, at least personally me, I think it gives an incentive to think of divorce almost like as a formality not to really get married. I mean, I think that it's pretty sad to see that divorce has almost become a formality within marriage because it's given less incentive or for seriousness in marriage, I feel. But again, what do you have to say for that?
Okay, we'll keep it short because the topic is actually bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So I'll just tie it in a little bit, and then Dr. Irene, take it away on that question. Sure. Basically, we're not as healthy as a human race as we'd like to be, and the reason for that is because parenting has gone very wrong. We have lost the connection to our infants. We're not holding a family structure that's nurturing, that is really holding the family together with rules and roles and boundaries and so on. And so as a result of that, we have the fallout material like the borderline personality disorder and like other personality disorders, and triggering things like emotional dysregulation, as is in the case of bipolar. And so go ahead and speak to the rest of that question.
Yeah, that's a very good question that you're asking. In my opinion, I think if you really want to look at just marriages and why they're not working out these days. I think a big component of marriage is having some sort of being in a team and having some sort of role as a person in your relationship. And I think our roles have really shifted, and people just don't want to really take on a role. They kind of want everything to be done, and their expectations really aren't there. It's a lot of shifting, especially in our culture and the millennials and all the this is a whole new other show.
Yeah,
but
right.
when you look at, let's say, borderline personality disorder and relationships, I mean, but one of the main components is that they won't be married for so long, because one of the things that really affects is their attachment relationships rather than strangers.
And then the other side of the coin is that typically, not always, borderline personality disorders, because they have abandonment issues, they pick partners that will abandon them. And I call that the WTF, or the what the Freud. It's the repeating pattern. And so they may pick somebody who's emotionally unavailable, shut down.
A narcissist.
Yeah.
There's a book like that.
Right.
The Narcissist Borderline Relationship. It's one of the dysfunctional functional relationship dynamics there.
Right,
is out
the
there.
dance of dysfunction, which there is a YouTube video that I did on that particular subject. But it's because really we just need to take responsibility for getting as healthy as possible before we enter into the relationship that we ideally want to have. And we can't lean on our partner to make us better. We have to make ourselves better so that we give. Because if you skip over from a mind map perspective, if you go to panel number 7, that's the panel of synergy. That's the interconnection. And so that when a person's not well and the other person's not well and they join forces, they're just going to really bleed each other out. They're going to vampire each other. There's going to be no light. And then at the end of that, there's just going to be a repelling factor, and there's just not going to be anything left for anybody in that relationship. So I hope that answers some of what you are wondering about. And any other quick thoughts or questions?
If I could just interject just for one more thing. As we look at relationships, and the independence and dependence, and when you're in a relationship, it becomes the interdependence. It seems like these days there's a little bit too much independence.
Too much independence or codependence.
Yes.
Right. And a relationship is that where you're not sucking anybody dry, but you're really bringing to that relationship. And so I like to think of it as the 1 + 1 is 3 formula. So you plus another combine, and as a result, you're better than who you are individually, and you make that other person better than who they are individually. It's synergistic.
Very well said.
Well, what I can say is that surely when in the topic of marriage and everything, I can surely say that within society for the past couple of decades, you are correct. Independence has been a major issue. But I think the major thing is that it's been a really big loss of roles, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of society, ideologies, but that's a talk for a different time.
You know what?
But I can surely...
Yeah, go ahead.
But since we're on the topic of schizophrenia, I think it is, or
bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder.
Okay, so do you think that maybe subliminal messaging can have a correlation between it, or maybe what's certainly showed to children nowadays that can maybe mess with their psychological mindscape, especially?
You mean subliminal messages through the media, symbolic messages? Is that what you're referring to when you say
yes.
We're very, especially as children, we're very permeable, and we absorb things like sponges, and these sponges imprint upon us. And so if we're not receiving, I call them psychonutrients, okay? If these messages are more like psychoviruses, I have my own little terms here, then they will usurp the person, and they will definitely create negative core beliefs that then later trigger in life. But do this, please. Email me show topic, and we'll go deeper into this. We want to go back into the BPD and the bipolar material, but please do suggest a show around this topic, and we'll make it happen. Okay.
All right.
Thank
Definitely
you.
Will.
Okay. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
calling in. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Okay.
questions.
Okay. Good.
All right.
Good
Have a
evening.
nice night.
Okay. Good night. Okay. So nature versus
Nurture.
nurture. Okay. Nature loads the gun, and
Nurture pulls the trigger.
And nurture pulls the trigger. So what about bipolar? Because many people think this is just straight up a biochemical issue.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, from the research that I've read and just going through school, it was a little confusing in the beginning because you do mix, the differential between bipolar and borderline. You get it mixed up. And many people get misdiagnosed as bipolar where they're actually a borderline personality.
Okay, so let's make some distinctions so people can understand. And by the way, I have had some letters to clarify the distinction between BPD and bipolar. First of all, bipolar is a mood disorder, and borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder. It's more pervasive. At the core of BPD is a fear of abandonment. It manifests as fear of getting into a relationship and then being dumped, and then not being able to handle the emotional chaos that results from that. And so as a result of that, people who are diagnosed with BPD, and again, these are labels. I call it all a system gone wrong. That's the way I see things. So the system gone wrong in this case is emotional dysregulation. That person has not been properly nourished emotionally. They have not had what are the ingredients for mental health: the eye contact, the skin contact, the attunement, and so on. And so as a result of this dysregulation, they depend on their partner to regulate them. And when the partner doesn't do that, then they will fly off the handle, and they'll engage in behaviors that are not really that healthy, and they will have the highs and lows. By the way, we have another call-in, so let's go ahead and take that call-in. But we are going to continue along the theme of making this distinction. So,
Hi, I've got it.
yeah, hi, how are you?
Yeah, good. Hi, my name
Hello.
is Ian. I'm calling from Sydney.
Hi.
Wow, nice. Okay.
Hi.
What time is it
Judy,
there?
Hi. So happy I get through to you.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I'm watching your shows on YouTube,
Okay.
and let me give you a little bit of my history. I've been married for 32 years,
Nice.
and
Okay.
and for the past 20 years, I can say I have issues. I make constantly the same mistakes over and over.
Okay, and I did not get your name. What is your name, please?
Ian.
Ian. Okay. And what culture do you come from, Ian?
From I'm born in Russia.
You're born in Russia. Okay. And so part of what we look at the Psychological Healing Center are cultural wounds. So is your wife also from Russia?
Yes, she is. Yes.
Okay, so you have that in common. So what's the mistake that you do over and over again, which I call the WTF?
I can explain. I love my wife the way it suits me. I'll give you a quick example.
Okay.
Quick example. For
Okay.
example, she asked me, what, give me a present when it's dinner time. I said, okay, I will. And during the day, I felt emotional. I felt like I miss my wife, so I give her a present during the day instead of dinner time. Or that's one of the examples.
Okay.
Second, well, my wife, actually, she have she reckon because of me, she have this issue is called PTSD.
Okay. Why do you think she has PTSD because of you? And again, I do want to stay on the topic of borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder. And let me define a little bit more BPD, because BPDs get very dysregulated quickly. So, so let's just take your example. Okay, so you're in this marriage with your wife, and maybe you're not mirroring her. She's not getting her needs met the way she needs her needs met. So what's going on here if she's over the top reacting to this? And from the point of view of the mind map and attachment theory, what's happening is that old childhood wounds are being ripped open. And she's being reminded of how mom did not attune to her, how mom did not mirror her. And now you're in that same category. You're the trigger. Okay, so you see, you're not the cause, meaning you're not the first earthquake. You're not the first, but you're the trigger of that wound. Make sense?
Yeah, but I hear what he's saying, but it's been happening. Like, she tried to explain to me how important it is for her, and how much she need to be more, I need to be alert, I need to understand her feelings and emotions. But seems to be, I don't know, I just cannot follow her instruction. I love her and I need her, but at the same time, I don't know. Another example, she asked me, for example, to write her notes to say how much I need her, I love her. I said, listen, I express myself verbally on a weekly basis. She said, no, that's not good enough.
Okay, so what's happening here? Do you want to comment on that, Dr. Irene?
Yeah, that's very interesting.
The ripping open the old emotional wounds.
Yeah. It's first of all, it's interesting how you both chose one another, because you're activating her.
I'm on the line as well. Is that okay?
Hi.
Oh, hello. Yes,
Yes.
wonderful.
Hi.
Yes, hello. So I was saying it's very interesting how you chose one another, because it seems like he re-triggers your wounds that you've had from the past. Would you say?
Yeah. Look, I watched the show for quite a while, and I followed the map, and it's excellent. But I think what he's triggering is the distrust that. What happened was, because this has been going on for so long, and because I have asked him to do this 25 years ago, and he said yes, and he never has done it. He didn't do it. And I trusted him completely, like I trust myself. So what happened? He completely violated the trust.
And how did he?
So it's not I don't think it's my initial wound. But what it is, it's the wound that he created in me.
Okay, so just
because of his wound.
okay,
like
usually, right? That's I could tell that you've been listening to the shows. You're familiar with the terminology. Look at this. And thank you for that. And sometimes when I hear people refer to the mind map, they've gotten quite a psychoeducation, so it's really fun for me to talk to people who know more about this, because then I could just get to the point. But you see, panel 1, your wounds plus your husband's wounds are triggering each other and causing a reaction. Now, it's possible, okay? And I think we're going to have to do more of a show on relationships, because we keep wanting to go back to BPD, but there's elements of BPD here, so listen for it. System gone wrong. What is BPD in a system gone wrong sense? Is that emotional unattunement. So let's just...
Exactly.
Okay, so let's just go with that. So you're saying to your husband, please, 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 emotionally attune me, and you need to do this 25 things. And he says, I love you very much, I don't want to lose you, I'm going to sign up for this plan. Okay? And then over time he discovers that he just can't keep the program going. It's not sustainable. Okay, so what are you guys going to do about that? You're going to experience it as a betrayal, as some kind of an abandonment, and he's going to experience it as maybe like a walking on eggshells, I'm in trouble if I don't, or a pressure that I have to do it if I don't do it. And so both of you are going to lose in this situation. So what I want to say about that is that, number one, I always say, it's the responsibility of two people to heal as much as possible so that when you come together as a united coupledom, then you can have more health to give to each other. And then definitely go to my website, drjudywtf.com, and pull up that Peaceful Healing Dialogue. It's under the form section. And you can, I want you to particularly pay attention to is to renegotiate the contract with each other, because sometimes people enter into contracts that they really can't keep. They want to, but they just can't do it. Okay, so this is where I want you to focus. And thank you very much for calling in. We're going to get back into it.
Judy,
Yes,
Judy, what I
go
hear
ahead.
from you, there is still a chance if we do a kind of proper way, there is a chance to save his marriage.
Of course there is. But you have to both give a little bit. You have to be truthful to your wife and say, look, sweetheart, I can do this, but if I start doing this, I'm going to lose my mind over it. And then your wife has to also say, look, but the truth is that I need maybe a little bit more than most human beings. However, I do understand that a lot of my lack of ability to soothe it's not your fault. It's because I didn't get the emotional goodies at cause. Do you have a copy of my book?
Not yet.
Okay, I do that, and I want to let the audience and you know that I'm just finishing my mind map video series, which will be out in hopefully the next couple of weeks. And this is an entire series of the mind map process led by me, and you can look it up on my website. Go to drjudywtf.com and you can pull it down under resources, and it'll say mind map video series. So that's another way to get psychoeducated. And I really believe that when people get responsible and educated, then they will be very motivated to heal their side of the fence so that they don't put so much pressure on each other that the other person breaks.
And it's like it's setting each other up for failure.
Yes.
And then they keep reinforcing your triggers, and they keep reinforcing your thought process of, well, he's not good enough, or I'm not good enough, maybe. But yeah, I think the PhD, the personal healing dialogue, is
the
an
peaceful
excellent
healing
source.
dialogue.
Absolutely.
So, and please feel free to reach out to me and the team. We have wonderful team members like Dr. Irene. And if you want to enter the mind map course, the mind map process, then we do teletherapy, we do Skype therapy. So reach out to us because I think you're dysregulated and leaning on each other too much, and it doesn't seem realistic. Okay, make sense?
Yes.
Sure does.
Okay, thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
very
very
much.
welcome. You're very welcome.
This is so interesting. It's bringing up everyone's relationship issues, which is so
Of
great
course.
because, a relationship for a person diagnosed with borderline personality disorder is quite intense, I mean, the fear of abandonment.
Yes.
I was thinking about the patients that I've worked with and we work with at the Psychological Healing Center. And
so do this so people could get really clear. Maybe bring up a case study of somebody who is bipolar and what that looks like in the treatment room versus somebody who's suffering from a real dysregulation, a more pervasive personality disorder that would fit to as defining borderline personality disorder.
So if I may begin with borderline first.
Go ahead.
It's more of a cluster B.
Okay.
So some of the components that really define borderline personality disorder is, they start to idolize a person. They start to depend on that person. It's like they become that person. And the sensitivity to rejection is just so intense. And God forbid that person attempts to even give a notion that they're leaving, the fear of abandonment is, their panel 3, a person with borderline personality disorder, the panel 3 would be, I'm not lovable.
Which is the negative core belief.
Which is, the
Yes.
negative core belief, which I'm not lovable, I'm not worth it. So what they end up doing, they attempt suicide. They try to kill themselves to keep the person in their life. That's very extreme. I had a case that a patient that I worked with who, who had a few relationships that didn't last very long, which is very normal in a relationship with borderline personality disorder. And it was really intense. He really wanted to be with her, but in the end, when he realized he couldn't, she destroyed his car. She almost set his car on fire. It's very extreme. It's very black and white. I guess if we go back to the way when we're born, we see as a baby, and please correct me if I'm wrong, as from my understanding, we're babies, and when we're babies, we have a perception of black and white. And as if we have healthy parent attachment and bonding and so forth, we learn how to develop the gray.
That's right.
So
yes.
we learn that, you have that the 1 or the 2-year-old who's walking and they stop and they turn around and they look at mom if they're still there,
Right.
But
the
if
checking.
the checking,
Yeah.
yes, it's all these little things that really reinforce the child to develop this gray way of thinking, so they're not so extreme, bad or good. And when you have a case with a patient who is diagnosed with by borderline personality disorder, they only see black and white. I love you or I hate you. I hate you, but don't leave me.
I have an episode on that one. You can check that one out.
It's my favorite episode because it's so true. And so one of the most hard things is a person who's in a relationship with a person who has borderline personality disorder, because then they start to feel guilty for being with that person because they feel like they are the reason why that person might kill themselves or might do something very severe,
Yes.
and they end up being in a relationship for many, many years because they feel guilty. But then that's how, can I say, borderline patients, or borderline individual will keep someone kind of on lockdown.
Yes.
Until that person really differentiates and breaks through the ice and realizes that if it's not them, it's going to be someone else,
That's
you know?
right. That's
So
right.
learning how to develop the gray and learning that, someone's going to leave, but they'll come back, or if they left, or if something bad happens, it's going to be okay is so important. For a person with borderline personality disorder, it's not going to be okay. It's the end of the world, and so forth.
And so in terms of going back to the cause, it's not okay because in order to have healthy independence, you have to have healthy dependence.
Yes.
And so that baby that's checking back with mom, mom is there. Okay, so if mother is there, baby can keep going forward and develop healthy independence, and then check back to make sure that mom is there. But if mom is not there, or mom is there but doesn't care, emotionally not there,
It's the end of the world.
and dad is not there, then the baby's checking and there's nothing there, and so the baby will run back to that person, and you can imagine there's fear of abandonment, lack of trust in the world, a sense of betrayal.
And then they start to devalue and get angry and anxious and just a bad roller coaster. I wanted to kind of bring up with you, Dr. Judy, to get your opinion on this as we're talking about nature versus nurture.
Sure.
As we look at attachment theory and object relations, and the child who bites the breast or rejects the breast, it kind of occurred to me that maybe, maybe it starts even that young, where in my opinion, I think you're born with borderline personality disorder because
Or
it's a
that
personality.
the feature, but it's not a
But it's-
borderline personality disorder.
Sorry.
it's a stage.
Yes.
It's a stage.
Would you think that's like the first stage where you see the baby
yeah.
who bites the breast?
Yeah, Melanie Klein, who did a lot of work with good breast, bad breast. That's what she's known for. So that's the splitting, but that's healthy splitting. The baby's trying to make this distinction. good and bad. Remember, babies are primitive, so they need to think black and white. And that's perfectly healthy for a newborn, because they've got to know that's good, that's bad, that's yucky, that tastes good.
It's survival.
Survival mechanism. But later, if you're stuck in that stage, there's a problem there, because everything looks black and white, and everybody then gets projected on, oh, you're all bad or you're all good. And that's where you were talking about the over-idealization, when the person's very, very good. And then the minute they let that person down, woe is me.
Yeah.
You don't want to be there.
Yeah, it's the instance where you're the best therapist in the world and you're a minute late to your session one day.
Right. Not good.
But from a therapist point of view, and we, it's a lot of mothering, that a lot of parenting you do to help. I mean, as working with patients that we work with, I see there's a lot of mothering. I feel like I have to, which is the beauty in therapy and working with a patient with borderline personality disorder, where you could help them develop a healthy attachment.
Yes.
But what ends up happening is then comes the fear of abandonment. See, now they're attached. But if you do something wrong, then that's it. They can cut you off.
And that's why it's so important to take it back to the cause with that particular patient, because they'll project that onto the therapist.
Yes.
And what we want to do is we want to remember to teach people to source the problem, that if the therapist is, say, 1 minute late, that's a really big trigger for the mom not being there, the mom being inconsistent. So we have to psychoeducate people to understand that particular moment of time in therapy is really a metaphor for many, many moments of injury. And that's how people can then begin to connect the dots and think like a shrink, as I like to put it, and then reprocess their own emotions and then hold cause responsible rather than their husband or their wife or their boss or their lover, whoever's in their life. So moving to
Bipolar.
Bipolar. So what does bipolar look like in the room compared to borderline personality disorder?
So there are two different bipolar, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and bipolar 2 is a more a milder form of bipolar 1. Okay. And it's there's this elation, there's a manic episode. I had a patient who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and when she was in her manic phase is, number one, the time that she would attempt suicide. And
so that's similar.
Yes.
But it's not an abandonment thing.
No. She was, in her mind, it was, she drove to Mexico and thought she was going to be the president of Mexico. Okay. It's very different.
Okay. So delusions of grandeur.
Yes. The grandiose thoughts, the I can rule the world, the speaking really, 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 really fast and just doing things really, really fast. And it's that where in borderline personality disorder, I haven't really seen, the grandiose thoughts. It's not that up and down. It's just the extreme bad or good. Where with the bipolar, it's the mood, the fluctuation of the mood. Yes. And there's the duration that's consistent too, where there's a duration of time where this mood is elevated or depressed.
And I think that one of the ways to diagnose bipolar is to give them certain medication. For example,
lithium.
You give them lithium in some cases, and not in all cases will it work. But sometimes that particular salt will balance the biochemistry and the symptoms will subside. So that's kind of a good litmus test for making the distinction and understanding.
With borderline, it doesn't work. Medication's not gonna.
Not that one. In any case.
Oh no, and that's a very intense one too. But I think the one thing that helped at least me differentiate, and when you look at the DSM-5, of course, what helps differentiate between the bipolar and borderline is the context that it's present in.
Okay.
Borderline is relationships, where bipolar is mood fluctuation.
Yes.
Is the easiest way you can understand it. As I said, borderline is in the context of relationships. Bipolar is mood fluctuation.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And again, I still hold to the biochemistry of our emotions. If we're given bad news, it literally changes the neurotransmitters in our brain. If we're given good news, it also spills in there the serotonin, the dopamine, and so on. And so I think that when there's a propensity already to fluctuate in mood, and if we're injured at the causal level, by that I mean if our parents are not emotionally regulating us and so on, if we don't have a parental internalized good enough mother that's like a good enough thermostat, emotional thermostat, I think that we can be more easily triggered into emotional dysregulation.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, that, and it's kind of sad actually, because nowadays it's bipolar is thrown around, you know, a lot, and it's kind of like the diagnosis of the month, like the flavor of the month, you know, where it's oh, I'm bipolar, oh, she's bipolar, and it's actually a very serious disorder.
Yes, and talk a little bit about the lows, because there are the manic highs, and by the way, the bipolar and borderline personality disorder, some people are diagnosed with both. So it doesn't mean that if you have borderline personality tendencies that you don't also possibly have the other. So it gets complicated.
Yeah, I kind of get very iffy when I see a patient diagnosed with both. It's almost, there was a psychologist I used to work with, and he would say there is no bipolar, it's only borderline. And I disagreed with him, and that was the end of our relationship. No, literally. We had an interview.
Well, see, maybe he was very black and white thinking, right?
Absolutely.
This is the reason why. Me, over.
Yeah, he did. He actually, he has a whole center doing DBT, working with borderline patients, and he's great with them, you know, and which is great. But you're gonna have to be able to have some sort of feedback from another person. Other person has to have their own opinion, you know.
Yeah, of course.
So that was the end of our relationship. But looking at where it comes to the highs and the super lows, when we look at bipolar 2, you experience the depressive episodes. So when you look at bipolar 1, I believe you have the manic, but you don't have the depressive. And once you have the bipolar 2, you have the depressive. Am I correct?
You know, I don't have my DSM-5 in front of me. I think one is bipolar 1 is...
you have your manic episode.
Yes.
And then once you have a major depressive episode, I believe it's bipolar 2, which and it gets confusing too. I always like to remember it falls into how the patient, if the patient tries to attempt suicide or not, how severe it is, that which falls into bipolar 1.
And then there's the psychotic features. That's when they really go over the edge.
They see things and hear things. Their depression has that as well. A few other, we can really dive into it and look at cyclothymic and stuff like that too. But but as we look at it, I mean, we could look at how if we can truly understand bipolar disorder, and not to throw it around, you know, I think it's really important to, especially we work with a lot of youth, you know, too, at the Psychological Healing Center. So we see that in high schools and in colleges, it's just thrown around where, oh, you're so bipolar, you know, or they're bipolar. It's serious. And a lot of times it's not diagnosed because in college especially, students who might be bipolar, you'll see them self-medicating with drugs. Yes. Which then there's a comorbidity where, you know, there's the addiction sense to it. But individuals don't know that they're bipolar. It's just they realize when they use a certain type of drugs, they feel normal, you know?
Right.
And
it'll take them down from that. Yeah. And I think, too, there's a problem with compliance with medication, because some people like the high. You know, who wants the low? We don't want the low, right? But that manic phase can be seen as a very intense and creative phase,
yeah.
a very creative time, and people who are, let's say, they tend to be more musical or artistic and writers and so on, they may even prize that manic stage because it can create some amazing ideas too. So who wants to medicate that away? It's just that,
and especially the medication we have, where you medicate a patient and they're catatonic almost. They can't.
Right.
Sometimes they can't get out of bed. They can't eat. They can't. There's a lot of side effects, and that's why a lot of times patients are not compliant. There's a lot of the song that we're going to hear today.
Oh yeah,
by
Thanks for choosing
Evanescence.
it.
Yeah, by Evanescence. It's a popular song, and the singer, she is diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and the name of the song is Lithium. And so she wrote the song, as I was reading, about the song and how it was written. She wrote the song to Lithium and saying how, please don't trap me. I feel like I'm in jail. So yeah. Go on.
Just that again, I think that drugs in the pharmacological industry, they're godsend to many people, and I still think we have to examine the nurture part, because we can't help certain things. If you have brown eyes or have brown eyes, it's more set in stone, but we can really be more malleable when we are dealing with the nurture aspect of it. And so that's why it's really important, no matter what the fallout material is, the symptoms, is that we teach people how to process their emotions. And so the more people can express, the more people can tell the truth, the less they implode or explode or project, or the opposite of projection would be to repress, the more healthy we are as human beings. So in order to have a healthy range of emotions, we have to have that range. We can't just hit the high notes or hit
Or
the
super
low
low.
notes.
Yeah.
We have to have a full range of feelings about ourselves and about individuals in our lives.
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes up is working with both type of individuals is the ability to contain emotions and to tolerate emotions. There's sometimes there's over containment, which I say, which then leads to suppression. But really to tolerate, it's almost with borderline personality disorder, it's the explosion where the
tolerate.
feelings,
No.
it's intolerable, and so they're very impulsive.
Yes.
It shows up in both though too. So
And going back to object relations, which is a way, it's a theoretical orientation in the profession of psychology. It has to do with internalizing the parent, and if the parent isn't internalized properly, I like to put it this way: a parent's function is to ingest their child's unmetabolized emotions, digest it for them, and then manifest it for them, so that the child can learn to model containment of emotions and processing emotions. And if a parent is also out there with their emotional world and they're not able to manage their own emotions, then how are they supposed to manage their child's emotions? And this is where the child gets dysregulated. They don't have the role modeling of regulation, and so they're uncontained, so to speak.
And as children, we
are
learn.
we short on time? 5 minutes. Okay, so we'll get into the shrink that tune pretty soon.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things, as at least for parents, is it's difficult when you have a parent who suffers from borderline personality disorder or bipolar, because again, as you said, they don't know how to deal with their emotions.
Yes.
And children are sponges, and they look for that person to learn how to deal, and if they don't get some sort of guidance, they're left on their own and kind of lost.
Of course.
And so what they do is they mimic and they mirror their parents.
Of course.
And it's the caller Ian, I believe, when he called earlier, he said, I keep doing the same thing over and over again. I remember repetition compulsion.
Yeah.
Freud. Freud,
repetition
our best
compulsion.
friend,
our best buddy. Yeah.
But it's that. So you let's say you are diagnosed by borderline personality disorder and you keep dating the same people over and over and over again, and you come to psychological healing center. I keep dating these, a-holes, and they keep treating me like this, and they keep leaving me. Everyone leaves me.
Yes.
No, please don't leave me. That's
Right.
That's the one thing. And it's that's interesting. I feel like I sometimes ask, have you left yourself? Have you abandoned yourself?
That's a great question. That's a really...
But yeah,
I'm going to borrow that question from you, Dr. Irene.
Of course,
okay?
no problem. I learn from the best. So
well, I'm learning from the best too.
I'm honored for you taking something from me. But yeah, it's so really, I guess, to kind of get down to, the difference between borderline and bipolar disorder. It's in the context. Borderline personality disorder, again, is within your relationships. Bipolar disorder, the mood fluctuations. Yes. So I know you guys Google everything out there, which I don't really recommend.
Well, we have a very educated audience, very curious, and I think that people, especially people who listen to this show and these types of shows, they're really, really wanting to understand WTF is going on here. Yeah. So we're saying what the Freud is going on here, well, some of it is straight up biochemistry in the case of bipolar, and I like to lean on the side of nature and the cause so that we can grab a hold of that and heal those wounds, so that even if we do have a natural proclivity toward biochemical dysregulation, we can still take a look at nurturing ourselves, regulating ourselves, and so on, and understanding how the triggers in our lives work. So
and really coming to terms that it might never go away, and it's a part of you, in some cases. But learning, one of the best things you can do in therapy is learn about yourself and learn about where and what and how and why, and then you take it and you utilize the skills that your therapist teaches you, So, I think that's the one thing you take from therapy, regardless of your diagnosis.
We're going to get right into the Shrink That Tune. Do we have time? Yes. Okay, great. And also, just for those of you who are looking to do this work and maybe even do it independently, check out the Mind Map video series. It's up on my website, and if you pre-purchase, you get a big discount. So let's get right into Shrink That Tune. And my tech support.
There you go. So then we'll just do this.
So we'll both shrink it, okay?
Sure. You want me to read it?
Go for it. Read it. Yeah.
I'll read it and then
we'll discuss.
Okay. So lithium, don't want to lock me up inside. Lithium, don't want to forget how it feels without. Lithium, I want to stay in love with my sorrow. Oh, but God, I want to let it go.
So there's this kind of ambivalent relationship with lithium, right?
Yeah.
That there's a dependency,
but they love the pain, the sorrow. It's their best friend. It's been with them forever, and all of a sudden, lithium comes along and takes it from them. It's kind of like losing yourself. That's part of you.
Okay.
You like that?
Yeah, I like that.
Come to bed. Don't make me sleep alone. Couldn't hide the emptiness. You let it show. Never wanted it to be so cold. Just didn't drink enough to say you love me. I can't hold on to me. Wonder what's wrong with me. Lithium, don't want to lock me up inside. Lithium, don't want to forget how it feels without. Lithium, I want to stay in love with my sorrow. Oh. Don't want to let it lay me down this time. Drown my will to fly. Here in the darkness, I know myself. Can't break free until I let go. Let me go.
And I like that line about drown my will to fly, because there's a sense that they don't want to lose the highs.
Yes.
And can you hear the hole in the soul?
Yeah.
So it's just, like this person's been really injured and they're feeling all alone in there, and the friend, the lithium. And
it's the psychotic boyfriend that you don't want to let go because they love you so intensely.
Yeah. Right.
Darling, I forgive you after all. Anything is better than to be alone. And in the end, I guess I had to fall, always find my place among the ashes. I can't hold on to me. Wonder what's wrong with me. Lithium, don't want to lock me up inside. Lithium, don't want to forget how it feels without. Lithium, in love with you. Oh, I'm going to let it go.
You know what's really interesting and very cool about it is that when somebody who's as artistic as, what's her name, Amy Lee, is suffering from bipolar, she's able to articulate the feelings and the whole process of it in a way that people really need to hear it, because this is where her hole in the soul and her pain and dysregulation turns into a piece of art, a piece of music that other people can relate to.
Yeah. And it's I guess when, as I read that, I kind of hear the pain and the frustration in her voice, you know, where she rather feel the pain than not feel anything at all, because it makes her feel alive.
Right. The numbness is not good,
no.
but then again, it hurts to feel what she's feeling.
Because it's so excruciating.
Yeah.
So I guess you can see how and why it could be so difficult to differentiate between bipolar and borderline.
Yes.
So, but we're specialists, so we do it the best we can.
We're making our distinctions.
Yeah.
And so if any of you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, write me, Dr. Judy, at psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And that's DRJUDY at psychologicalhealingcenter.com. Sorry for that long email address. I do pay attention to requests for shrinking that tune and topics and so on. And thank you very, very much, Dr. IRENE YAYMADJIAN.
Thank you, Dr. Judy. Thank you.
My pleasure. A great member of the team. And so feel free to call in. We're going to have many, many more shows going forward. And thank you very, very much for tuning in, Dr. Judy WTF. And everybody stay safe and as balanced, and start learning how to think like a shrink so that you could process your own emotions and become independent of therapy, because that's what therapy is supposed to be about, is not making you dependent on therapy, but eventually helping you to become higher functioning independent beings.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.